It's such an honor to be here. I want to first say thank God for journeying mercy and for keeping me sane. I moved to New York recently to teach at Barnard as their distinguished fellow in social justice. And for the first time in many months, I stay in a house alone with my 4-year-old. So from getting questions of Mama, how did you meet Daddy? To questions of how did I come about? To questions of when are you traveling again? I tend to want to lose my mind some days, but I realize that I'm living in America and I have to be patient with the 4-year-old. I'm really happy to be here to share my journey with you, wonderful women, looking at the power of possibilities. And I think my whole life and my work and my journey into peace activism and women's rights advocacy is just saying it is possible. This fight is possible. And this other fight is possible. So most times I get the question, what is your drive? What drives you to leave from New York, fly to Belgium, do something, go to South Korea, do something, go to Burma, work with women, go to Japan, all in 1 week and then fly back to New York? What is the drive? And I say anger. Anger and pain propels me into action. Results and joy keeps me running. Results and joy are the fuel that I need to keep moving. At 17, war turned my world upside down. We had to move. I grew up in a community of many different languages and many religious groups, but it was a true community. Everyone owned a child. Everyone loved you. Everyone celebrated you. And everyone disciplines you. And if you dare go to your parent to say, someone disciplined me, they disciplined you again. And then all of a sudden, at 17, just after high school, a civil war broke up in Liberia, a war that would kill almost 10% of our population, send 1 million plus into refugee camps, and over another 1 million as internally displaced persons. As I journeyed through the war from 17 up until 31, because at 31 was when my sisters and I took the action that we did in Liberia, I would see many things that would depress me, make me upset, and really make me cry. And every time the question would be, is it possible to change the tide? And I'll give you some depressing stories, very depressing. The first story I'll have to tell you is a story of me in a community after I had my first son. And there were 4 little girls in this community we would persistently see hurdle together. The boys in the community, favorite pastime was having sex. They had nothing to do. They were soldiers. And when they weren't fighting, they were looking for girls to violate. And these 4 little girls kept together and kept hurdled together all of the time. And I noticed them and engaged them one afternoon. And then one asked me, she was bold enough to say, Auntie, is it true that if you don't have sex at a particular age, you're going to lose your mind? I told myself, this is time to step in. I took those 4 young girls, and every Saturday we would sit down and talk about bodily integrity, do their homework, and the importance of education. Everyone in the community, including the young men, knew once I had engaged with them, that was a no-go area. And years passed, and these 4 girls disappeared, and I never saw them again. During my journey working with ex-child soldiers, I was sent to northern Liberia one day. And I had so much belief in the power of humanitarian organization to do good, and the power of people who say they were doing good to do good, specifically men. I had them in high esteem, especially all these people leave their families and they're here catering. And something told me you're going to get a rude awakening. So I go into this community to work, and the first thing the woman tells me, tonight you have to double bolt your door. Because the house you're sleeping in, the guy who owns that house, who is the head of an humanitarian organization, is a known rapist in this community. And the next morning, I got the rudest awakening because my driver who took me, who I felt was a family man, we saw this little girl, not this very high, standing, changing money. And he said, look at her, pretending as if she has a lot of money. And I said, how do you know her? And he said, I slept with her last night and gave her $5. I went back really upset. Later on in my journey, I will go to a place where we have circles with women. We call it our space to shed off our weight, exhale. Because I have a theory that when we have crisis and conflict in communities, women are like sponges. They absorb the dirt, and they never have the space to squeeze it out. So we have this circle with these women, and we're sitting there talking. And one of these women have a hole in her leg, in her foot from the bottom here. You can see straight through it. And she's blind. And then she said to me that the humanitarian organizations have come, and they're giving tents for people to live in. And the guy refused to give me a tent because he wants me to have sex with him. That was it for me. I told myself, it's time. I told my sisters that were in that circle with me, it's time for us to do something. We're taking this humanitarian organization on. And they said to me, Leymah, what do you think we can do? No one is going to believe us. I said, just follow me. We sat down and wrote a letter and chronicled the story, not just of that one woman, but all of the other women, and told them we gave you a day or else we're going to the press. And in one day, they responded and asked us, can you find a women's organization that can cater to the special needs of women on this particular camp to deal with them? And all of my sisters came back and said, it's possible. I said, yes, anything is possible if you set your mind to it. Over the last few months, since I won the Nobel Peace Prize, I've been saying to myself, whilst we've done peace work, whilst we've done all of these different things, women empowerment, if we have to get our girls from here to here, education is something that we need to work on. I have an 85-year-old friend, so I go to visit her, and we're sitting in her garage. But by the time I walk in, she said to me, Jesus sent you to me. I said, Jesus always send me everywhere. And she said, this is someone I want you to meet. And there's this pretty young 17-year-old sitting down. And she said, I want you to take her. I said, oh, lady, I have 6 children plus 100 more. Do you think I'm able to take one more? She said, child, the Lord is with you. You know how those old ladies will always tell you Jesus will give you money and God will bless you. And the Lord is with you and you're going to get whatever you need to get, but just take this one child. And then I asked her, what is your story? At 14, she left home and became a sex worker. At 17, she was tired and she was ready to retire. I asked her, all the times, the 3 years you've been doing sex work, how much can you say you made one night that you can say, yes, I was satisfied? And she said, in 3 years, the highest amount she made was $50. And then I said to her, so what do you want to do? She said, Auntie, I want to go to school. I want to do something with my life. I'm tired with drugs, and I'm tired having sex with 5, 6 men a night. And then I told her, come on, follow me to my office. Get in my car, let's go. We got in the car and drove, and I turned to her at one point, stopped the car and said, I'm going to be your worst nightmare in your life. I'm going to invest in you because I believe that you can do it and you can make it. But child, if you even try going back, I will hunt you down in every ghetto and you will be straight by hook or crook. Have you heard a woman tell you that? And she said, no. I said, you will be straight. And she said, in Jesus' name, I will be straight. I said, you got to be straight. I tell you these stories because this is real life story, things happening in people's lives. But until you step out of your comfort zone, until you step out of everything that is happening in your comfortable space, you will never really see or hear. In the US, I see as I go places and hear stories. I remember once going to New Jersey to work with a group of girls. And the first thing I walk in the room dressed like this, the first little girl say, "You African woman, what do you have to tell me?" I said, "Well, girl, I can tell you one thing. I have a bachelor's degree in being refugee, a master's degree in domestic violence, PhD in single parenting. Do you want me to tell you more of my credentials? Because wherever you think you've been, I've been there. Whatever trash you think you've seen that have you upset, I've seen. And I'm able to meet you halfway if you're prepared to meet me halfway." We had a very wonderful conversation, but every time from one space, whether it's Burma, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Liberia, whether it's Congo, DRC, you see these things, and the one question people keep asking, is it possible to turn the tides? Is it possible to make an impact? Is it possible to change this situation around? So I started by telling you the story of these 4 little girls. 2011, we win the Nobel Peace Prize, and there's all this frenzy of global media following me everywhere. And then I go to vote. There's something about going into the community you grew up in. It humbles you. So nobody was taking that crap about me being a Nobel laureate. I had to stand in line. So I stood in line, and then this little girl that I did not recognize came from in front of the line and said to me, "I will give you my space." And I said to her, "That's very kind." So I walked up, took up her space, and another guy said to her, "Okay, but then you come and stand in line." But she kept looking at me, smiling, and looking at me, smiling, and looking at me. And finally, she said, "Auntie, you don't remember me." And I said, "No, sweetheart, I don't remember you." She said, "You remember those 4 girls in '93 that you took to your house every Saturday, and we used to eat, and you would teach us our lesson and talk about going to school? I'm one of them." And she called her name. I finished high school, I'm in college, and I don't have a baby. From where I come, that was another Nobel Peace Prize. The power of possibility is only possible if you decide, "I'm going to step up and step out and do something." The little sex worker is currently in an all-girls boarding school. I wasn't sending her to any boarding school with boys. She's currently in an all-girls boarding school and trying to readapt, re-socialize to being a child. And a few weeks ago, we had a telephone conversation, and the one thing she said to me, "I am not going to let you down. In 3 years, I will finish high school, and I'll go to college, and I'll be like you. I will help some girl. I'll do something." The power of possibilities. I've been to many places, and I've seen many women, and I've seen work that great women do. But you know what? It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a whole budget. It doesn't take project proposals. Sometimes it takes nothing at all, but just a simple smile or a hug or a pat on the shoulder to say, "You can make it, and I know you can." The world we live in today is so individualistic. Everyone is so concerned making money, and we're just making money and going and making money and going and just forgetting to the point that sometimes we make the money and die and never use the money. I was in Houston last year, and a little girl asked me, "Madam Gbowee, I'm sure when you come to these places, you are amazed by the huge buildings." And I said, "No, sweetie, I'm not a very good tourist. I don't look at huge buildings. I look beneath the huge buildings." the homeless people, the drug addicts, the sex workers, people needing someone to come and tell them that a different life is possible. That's what I'm constantly and persistently looking for. Because the world needs this. We need a group of people who can just step out of their space. And you know, not everyone has to be a peace activist or a women's rights advocate. But there's something deep inside that if you feel like I need to do this, you need to step out and do it. You see, when I started with those girls, people used to say to me, those four, in this community, in 4 years, they will all have children. You're crazy to be wasting your time. When we tried to take on a humanitarian organization, people told us no. When my sisters and I banded together and decided that we would take on one of the most brutal warlords in the history of Africa, they called us toothless bulldogs, bunch of unmarried women looking for press or public attention, all kinds of names. Today, we are in a history book. We find ourselves in the museum in Washington, D.C., and we're wondering, who brought us here? We got there because we knew that we had to do something. When you decide that this power that I have is possible, you always have a group of people out there telling you it's not possible. And I tell young people all the time, look at great men and women. When they start doing things, everyone thinks it's crazy. I'm sure the time they were inventing Facebook, everyone was laughing at those young people and saying, Facebook, that's the craziest idea. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, and everyone thought you would die and never be a hero. Dr. King started a civil rights movement, a movement where black and white would sit together and everyone would be equal, as the Constitution of this great country says. Gandhi said Indians would go and do something, and they all were laughed at, scorned at. Maybe a year you're making it big in the corporate world, or you're doing something, but you have some idea, some power, you're thinking about a possibility, and that power is stuck in you. But you're too ashamed to step out to even say it to your husband or to your daughters because you feel like, for my level of intelligence or where I've been, if I say this, people will laugh at me. Trust me, you're in good company right now. My 15-year-old, every time I open my mouth to say something, looked at me and said, Mama in the world listens to you? That is the craziest thing I've heard in a long time. She said, some days I need to record you and just put it on YouTube. And maybe no one will pay attention to you anymore. But the power of possibility is that power that changes the world. Currently, we have this huge thing on our plate. Syria is going to peace talks. And we have all of the international protocols and resolutions that say women should be at the peace table. But all of a sudden, we're getting back from the world powers that the Syrian peace talk is too complicated and they can't allow Syrian women to sit there. Because the world is saying it's impossible. But we are saying it is possible. And someone say you want to take on that fight as a crazy fight. But that is a fight that is possible. So my point to us today is that there's something that you can do. On this journey, I never know the answer. I never know where I'm headed. But sometimes I just go. My mother said I'm like the one who never tests the water but dives in head first. Because if you think too much, you lose your steam. It is possible, people, for us to make a change. It is possible for us to turn our upside-down world upright. We took on a dictator, And we decided we were not going to stop as a group of women. When the winds and the waves were against us, we threatened to strip naked. When the winds and the waves were against us, we barricaded men with guns into a hall and without arms, held hands and said, "You can't come out." When the winds and waves were against us, we went to the UN and told them, "You are not doing this right. We live here. We know the solution to this problem." When the winds and waves were against us, we went out there and mobilized women and made history by electing Africa's first female president. We all have the power in us to change the tide. Yolanda Adams, the great African-American songwriter, sang my all-time favorite. And I tell people this is my song. This is the song that propels me when I'm angry to get up. This is the song that helps me when people doubt that I'm able to do something, that helps me. The song is "Never Give Up." She says, visions that can change the world, trapped inside an ordinary girl. That's me. That's you. She looks just like me and you, but she's too afraid to dream out loud. And she goes on to say, every victory comes in time. It works today to change tomorrow. I had my 17-year-old son, who's now in New York, a soccer star at his high school. In 1996, and I slept on the floor of a hospital. He was preemie. I didn't have money. And I remember after we finally got released from the hospital through some good Samaritan, one day we're sitting, living in an unfinished house, mere 17 years ago. And this man asked me, "So with all of this happening in your life, how are you going to make it?" And I looked at him and said, "Sir, I'm going to be great." He laughed. He laughed in my face. I said, "I will be great. People will know my name." He looked at me. 3 children. I'm sleeping in his mother's unfinished building. I have to beg for food. And then I'm telling him I will be great. I sounded like a fool. The power of possibility always makes you look like a fool. Dear sisters, the world is waiting to hear from someone in this room. The world is waiting for you to stand up and make a fool out of yourself in order to change the tide. Because you see, in this world that we live in, the sensible things don't make sense anymore. It's the crazy things that will bring our world upright. Join me. You have the power. Let's make it possible for some girl, some woman to dream. Thank you.